This week I've been dealing with street children and the issues they face whilst out on the street in the local town. And it's a difficult subject to talk about. These boys and girls are not only homeless and hungry, not only have no one to love them, nowhere to sleep, no food in their bellies, often covered in various different types of fungal infections and stuff because of lack of hygiene. Get involved with drugs, but unbelievably, there's even worse things happen to these boys and girls. This week I had to sit and listen to a child tell me that he had been raped by men in the town. It became such a frequent and regular occurrence that it was no longer abuse and rape to him, it was something that happens. So instead of them having to find him, he would go to where this was going on, to be abused. Because that was his physical contact in life, I guess. That was his routine. The young children who were hitting the streets, these men will then take younger boys to that boy, whilst he does things to that child. And thus the vicious cycle continues. And the only way to stop the cycle is to take the children out. And there's no need for these children to suffer like this. All they need is a place to go. If they had a place to go, somewhere safe, where these men can't get to them, they wouldn't have this problem.
The more that we seem to long for truth, the more the decision must come whether we are to find that truth by going within or looking externally to find things like historical truth. And I think we are all a blend of that in some retrospect when we are in the movement of spiritual awakening or spiritual rebirth, where we are trying to find out the truth of our beingness, of why we are here, of our God, of our dimension, our reality. And one thing that I've noticed is that it is the thoughts of mankind that are creating the matrix. And the majority of people don't recognize, due to the current state of our world and our society, dragging us into external patterns, meaning that we spend most of our time searching externally, searching on the internet, on YouTube, in whatever format that external search will take. And when we are externalized like that, the inward journey isn't so easy. When you look at events inside this world, such as recently we had the coronation of King Charles, there is a ruling elite. And remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness in high places. And this is important because I know that there are humans that I have seen in this world who have created challenges for the work that we are doing, for example, to bring about the protection and the care and the love for these children. I have seen humans who are working in opposition to that, and they are not having some open allegiance to a dark force or a satanic or demonic energy. They are not at all, but merely in the lostness, shall we say, in the very fact that their awareness of who they are has gotten lost inside their body and their mind. They are a vibrational match for that other frequency, for that other dimension, and therefore they can become avatars of the will of that which is not the Christic, shall we say. The Christic being a term that points at the will of a compassionate creator. When you see this, then you can also see that that can happen inside systems of wealth and power and royal families, for example, or ruling elite or banking elite. Some may well have complete awareness and knowledge of the spiritual wickedness in high places, but others may be simply so spiritually bankrupt and so caught as the sole awareness they are inside the image and the stories of the memory and the ancestral stories of this personal identity, which is of high importance, that they are a match to enact the will of one who wishes only to attain the energy of mankind. The work of the fallen angels is to attain the attention, the energy, the worship of mankind, be it openly or subversively. And right now that is happening. Many are worshipping that element, the perversion of the world, instead of giving thanks for something deeper. Many are fulfilling worldly desires as a pursuit to freedom and happiness. Not many are trying to fulfill the desires of Christ for happiness, which is to transcend the desires of the world and find freedom that way. And so with this coronation and reflecting on human consciousness, I felt to point this out to everybody, how it is that the ruling elite, be they witting, knowing parties who are in allegiance with a certain force, or be some of them pawns who are spiritually barren and so do not recognize the force which is driving into them, that due to the systems of things like the monarchy, the banking elite, the ruling elite families, the societies behind all of this, that humanity's consciousness is being steered in a way whereby we ourselves create our own matrix. We ourselves disconnect ourselves from the truth. And to understand that, I will use the UK, where I was born and raised, as an example. You see, if your thoughts are creating the matrix, that means that you have to be disconnected from freedom from the matrix. Now, when you are born as a child, a sovereign child of God, a sovereign child of the creation field of the cosmos, of the generous heart of God, of the Christ, then you are sovereign. And all of a sudden, inside that sovereign state, is pre-existing system that our ancestors have created to sustain sentient life in this world takes a hold of you and says, I must now birth you into this system that we use for our survival. And that birthing is the same as birthing a ship, and so you get a birth certificate. And so begins a birth certificate identity, which is connected to that system of municipalities and its management, which are assisting in the survival needs of humanity and the municipalities, which we all require, sanitation and roads. And so at the outset, this seems very logical, sensible, and beautiful to have a census that says we will birth every child being born, so we know how many children need to access the municipalities that we have here. And this is, I feel, a very honest development for living in community, as I have witnessed it whilst building a community in East Africa where 200 residents are from nothing. You had to monitor who was living there to understand your requirements for sanitation and food, etc. However, here we have adopted an identity inside our mind. It is just an identity in thought that's saying, okay, as this sovereign child of loving awareness, this beingness which has taken human form, you are now going to put on a suit in thought to allow you to function with your fellow man. And again, this is acceptable, but if that suit becomes so alluring that your awareness believes that it is the suit first before the sovereignty, then begins the need for spiritual rebirth and spiritual awakening. For you descend into the thought-based world of your personal identity. Now, the system that you are born into does not reconnect you to the sovereign. It doesn't do that. What it does is it places you into an education system, and in that education system, it reinforces this birth certificate identity. It reinforces that identity into you and into your life. And as it's reinforcing that, it's also doing something to your mind, to your brain. And the way by which your brain is being trained is ensuring that potentially for the rest of your life, you will not return to that sovereign state. And this is purposeful by Satan, because return to the sovereign state is return to God. Now, what I mean by that is the education system could easily once a day take our children and say, let us all recap and remind ourselves what is going on here. You are born sovereign in this infinite cosmos. You are manifesting from it. The planet has forested forests. The forests have humaned humans, and humans have settlemented settlements, and we have a management system around that, and we have birthed you into that to monitor your functionality within there and to ensure that people are behaving correctly when they are bringing themselves into this dimension and into this world. We are nevertheless wearing at the same time an identity to function inside that system. This would bring a child into a space of attuning to the origin of whereby which they are truly from. But we don't give them that attunement, and that attunement brings peace of mind, joy, love, and sanity. But what we are doing is we are not offering that attunement. And so we say to the child, you are an Englishman or an Englishwoman or American or a Japanese person, wherever you're from, this is what you are. And if you recall and store this information in your mind, and then recall it when you have a test, you'll pass. And so the mind moves from memory to future, memory to future. And as it's moving from memory to future, you are also told that in the future, you'll find your joy. You'll find your attainment by supporting this system that is built around the birth certificate identity. And as you continue that movement, you chase fulfillment in the future, and you never align to the truth of the here and the now. This movement stops you from connecting to the sovereign, for the sovereign connection is only found here and now. Peace with God, connection with God, the voice of God, the guidance of God, the joy of God. It is the supernatural powers that you have in God is only born by attuning here and now. There is no future and past in that relationship. It's here and now, or it's nothing. And so the operating system by the time you leave education that you are using dominantly is your mind, and it's a broken one because it's no longer knowing where to find its peace and its love and its satisfaction, which comes from the present moment alone and attuning to that, and with it the true origin, the sovereign identity of where you are from. The elitist ruling class have rigged this. They have given you this restricted band of consciousness. Now, if they feel they are doing the right thing, or if they are in some kind of allegiance with the fallen forces of this world, then you have to, if you are among this community, if you hold any understanding of the Abrahamic stance that there is an adversary to humanity, there are fallen angels, and they are on a different road to that of the Christic. The Christic road is one of alignment, love, and compassion. Theirs is completely different. Theirs is rebellion against God. If you look at human intelligence collectively, the output of that intelligence is a machine, and the output of collective intelligence is valued. If you can understand the difference in the output of human intelligence on a personal level, when your human intelligence is stimulated by attuning to the sovereign you and the peace, the joy, and the love that Christ brings there, by you dying, you being the birth certificate identity and all of those roles based in thought, and Christ being born, the new operating system which is filled with love and freedom. If you know that on an individual level, and you see the alteration in the output of your intelligence on an individual level, you will see the output of intelligence on a collective level is going to be the same. It's going to be profoundly different. And therefore, humanity and its intelligence as a machine inside this dimension is being steered into a certain output. And that output has us suffering and struggling. And what we are trying to do is those people who are anxious and depressed, and the solution to that is undoubtedly connecting back to the roots of where they are from, so they feel home, so they feel peace. We are not bringing our children to that place. And so we are trying with our own intelligence to satisfy the disconnection from the sovereign identity and the suffering that is born there and the confusion that is born there with our own intelligence and with medical science, and in recent years with trying to change the sex of children before we connect them to the wisdom that is organizing the cells of nature into the stable, organized, peaceful state that it is in. The organization of the mind of man can also be organized by that same connection to the sovereign. But we are not bringing anybody there because the majority of people don't know how to get there themselves. They only wish to move from memory to future, memory to future. And so we are trying to satiate this void with our creations, with our medications, etc. And this is perpetuating the matrix in its entirety, because our thoughts are the issue of creating the matrix based upon how we have all been educated, especially at this time. If our mind were able to settle between that training from recalling memory to future, then we would connect to the sovereign and our capacities as a being, as a human species. Now, this whole system, therefore, of thought has also restricted you from the other bandwidth of consciousness. You have been given a very limited bandwidth of consciousness by the time you leave school. And the elite either are so spiritually barren but inside material power that they don't realize they're doing it, and they are serving a master beyond this dimension, arguably, which is referenced as we wrestle not against flesh and blood but spiritual wickedness in high places. Or they are in open allegiance through their societies and their religions, and they are in communication and in agreement with that notion of another sentient force, that surrendering and yielding and attuning to the sovereign state and the presence and the love and the joy of God is not the road. That the road should be that you understand it with as much knowledge and intelligence as possible and try to become it yourself. To do that requires energy. If you look at this, if you are going to try and become God yourself, you need energy. And the only infinite energy source we have is the generous heart of all creation, pouring forth all things, and nobody understands fully that infinite energy source. But if you need that energy, then what you ideally want to be able to do is bring species that are incarnating the purity of soul into a species. The beingness, the loving awareness we all are is incarnating into a soul. You need to direct that species in a certain direction. And the birth certificate identity system is doing that. It's altering the output of our intelligence. And if you are believing in Satan and the fallen angels, then imagine this, and you must unrestrict your mind to imagine this. They are in another dimension, a spiritual realm. Why would they not pursue technology? If we pursue technology to great benefit, why would they not, as sentient life? If we fell due to their interference as denoted in the Abrahamic faiths and as depicted in the Sumerian text that says that another species interfered with humanity and created a slave, if any of that bears significance, then they would create technology from their dimension also. And if they can create technology from another dimension, perhaps they can create technology in this dimension. Perhaps they can create avatars in this dimension to move around in the 3D without them having to descend into that density. Perhaps they can transport themselves into the 3D and attach to people to take the soul essence from them, because humans have a connection to a higher dimensional field because we are innocent. They, in their arrogance, are no longer innocent, and so they do not have a connection to that depth of dimension that we do. All of this must be asked if you believe upon Satan and the demonic and spiritual wickedness in high places. Who's to say that they don't have 3D biological avatars that are moving around in our reality? You can't if you are believing they are so powerful and advanced that they may pursue technology. You have to say it's a potentiality. But then what would be the best possible way to take a species and make it fall, to surrender its energy to your way, to surrender its energy to the perversion of your way, the rebellion against that which is sacred? To take the sacred act of making a child with your loved one and churn it up inside the broken technology of the mind of man into a perverse energy that you can access and use to continue your sojourn, to challenge the heavens, to try to become God. You could steer the intelligence of humanity into a space where it lacks the wisdom to see what it's doing. And that wisdom would be found in the source code connection, in the sovereign identity, prior to the birth certificate, which the schools and education and the civilization is not leading us towards at all. Only the odd fragment of society wake up to this. If they were to need you to become completely amnesic of that sovereign state, the greatest chance that they have for that to happen is artificial intelligence, and we do not have the wisdom to say stop or put the brakes on or perceive that. And so when I see people celebrating the coronation of someone like King Charles, who is the head of the world's financial centre, if you don't understand that the city of London, the centre of London, it has its own government, it has its own police force. It is separate from the UK. It is the financial centre of the ruling elite. The Vatican is separate from its country of origin. It's a sovereign state. It's the religious spiritual centre that they have used. And Washington DC is not a state. It is the war centre. The setup is there subversively. And in that setup, the prize is the output of human consciousness by any means. If you are not openly sharing the truth about the workings of a human inside education, if you don't speak with them about the chrism within them, if you don't speak with them about their interdimensional powers, if you don't speak with them about the truth that if you connect to that sovereign and attune to the source of creation, you will bring forth supernatural capacity. And King Charles never mentions that. King Charles is the head of the Church of England, and that church is based around Yeshua, and Yeshua's teachings were completely based around supernatural capacity. And the birth certificate identity atrophies your development as a human into a restricted bandwidth of consciousness, which is the matrix in and of itself, and away from developing and growing and the spiritual supernatural. To the birth certificate identity, it's supernatural, but to the sovereign being, it's natural capacities you are supposed to have. For the fallen ones who function here, fear your natural capacities to be able to drive out the entities of this world, for example, to pray in the spirit, to have prophecy, to have insight, intuitive capacity. They fear that. They can't attune to that as you do, and their technology can't reach that depth as you do. And so they need to keep you away from it. For how on earth can entities have an effect on the ruling elite of the world if all of the humans around them have dominion over them? And so the world stage that we are on is therefore one of profound hope, because the whole thing is reliant on people believing that mind is master, and believing that the personal self, that the birth certificate identity is who they are. And every single human being on planet Earth can deprogram that without any technology, without anything other than sitting still and not satisfying their boredom. And eventually the awareness will start to liberate itself from the prison of the mind. And when the awareness liberates itself, you will begin your spiritual rebirth, for you will die. And if you understand the behaviors in your life, which are the pursuit of worldly desire, and you eradicate them, then Christ will be born. And when that happens, you will have strength in this reality to, as Yeshua said, pick up your cross. Seems we are referencing the king's coronation. The matrix is built from your thought, and the ruling elite, they really don't want you to see that. With such hope that every human has the ability to simply stop satisfying their boredom, say no to the world, and deprogram that state and connect to their soul, to that loving awareness we are behind all of the worldly roles, and in doing so access the state of consciousness that they have arguably painstakingly restricted you from, or inadvertently, whilst influenced by the fallen ones, brought into your life with such rigidity as we have to do. There's such hope in that. The matrix relies on thought. It's got nothing to do with the banks, it's got nothing to do with the government, nothing to do with the media. It's to do with thought individually. If enough wake up to that, it begins that the Christic begins to output the intelligence of humanity instead of the insane separation that we see ourselves in right now. And for thousands of years we've built from fear, which is separation. In the sovereign identity you have unity. When we build from unity,